Folks, this is Adrian Galysh, and you're listening to BODS Mayhem Hour. Tune in, or just don't tune in at all.
Welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour, your source for all hard rock, heavy metal, new metal, alternative, punk, horror punk, hardcore, rock, and all local bands, with your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bodfather.
Hey everybody, welcome to BODS Mayhem Hour. I'm your host, John the Bod, a.k.a. the Bodfather, and as always, I'm bringing you guys awesome interviews. Today it is an honor and privilege to have Mr. Adrian Galysh. He is an in-demand solo artist, session guitarist, published author, and educator with an illustrious career spanning 5 studio albums. He's done numerous collaborations and performances with industry giants like John Roth, Yngwie Malmsteen, that's huge. That's huge right there. Robin Ford, Mike Kinley, George Lynch, another one there, Warren DeMartini, and I hope I pronounced his last name right, and many more. Galysh is also a Guitar World magazine online lesson columnist and education coordinator for Guitar Center Lessons. He's the author of the book, Progressive Guitar Warm-Ups and Exercises. He uses Brian Moore guitars, D'Angelico guitars, Suhr guitars, sit strings, Seymour Duncan pickups, which they are mighty awesome, and effects, strap locks, Voodoo Lab, and Morley pedals. Today we'll be talking about Adrian's 20th anniversary edition of Venusian. Did I say it right that time?
Venusian Sunrise.
Venusian Sunrise, recorded at the age of... he recorded this at the age of 22, folks, and he's re-releasing this album. So we're going to dive into this and see what changed with all this. So welcome to the show, and sorry about the long intro, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, John.
You're re-releasing this album after 20 years being recorded in your parents' basement at the age of 22. So what made you want to re-release the album? Was it just because of how things have came along of remastering albums today, or were you just not satisfied with the sound that you had? And plus, you've added live tracks on this re-release as well. Yeah,
so it's the latter. So you can imagine me straight out of college, studying music, wanting to get out there back when I was 21, 22, and, I had it in me to write and record a whole record of songs. And back then in the mid-90s, it wasn't too common to have a home studio like it is now, because everybody's just got a laptop where they can do it.
Sure.
But back then I saved up some money from teaching and doing session work, and bought myself an 8-track recorder and a mixer and some computer software to kind of go with it and do some sequencing. And so did the whole album just on 8 tracks. So you can imagine it's a couple tracks of programmed drums, bass, and guitar, keyboards, and lead guitar, and then that's it. You're done. And did the best that I could with, the tools that I had and my abilities at the time. And over time, eventually I moved to Los Angeles and started pursuing my music career really seriously, and recorded and released, newer albums and got better at it. And obviously with technology growing and being what it is, things started, sounding better and better with every album. So I knew that I was still playing those songs live from Venusian Sunrise, and, people still wanted to hear them, but eventually that CD just went out of print, just ran out of copies, sold them all. And, over time, I was like, man, it'd be great to just revisit, retrack this stuff, make it sound like I always imagined it could sound. And it wasn't until this past year where I was like, man, it's coming up on 20 years. My little marketing thinking cap was like, this might be kind of a cool thing to do for a 20-year anniversary. Not only is it the 20th anniversary of the record, but I guess essentially sort of my career as a solo guitar artist kind of thing. So now with technology being what it is, my home studio being way better than it used to be, I can do it the way I wanted to do it, or at least the way I imagined and hoped I could have done it, when I was just a kid. So that's the deal.
But you got to have a lot of pride of going back and listening to that album, to where you've came from there to now, and appreciate it a lot more too.
Yeah, going into it with a fine-tooth comb, like really just having to reproduce, keyboard parts and guitar parts, I essentially had to, rediscover what is the genesis of, what makes me now, how I began to write and record material and how I would, play guitar. So it was kind of neat to see how much, I've gotten better, but at the same time discover maybe how green I was back then.
Yeah. I can imagine this to it and cringing a little bit. Cause
Yeah.
I mean, I was in just a little band when I was in high school. I mean, it wasn't nothing, but it was cool to do. And then when I go back, I'm 38 now. When I go back and listen to it today, I'm still like, oh my God. Jeez, really?
Yeah. And for me, it's cringeworthy to listen to the original recording.
Yeah.
But I get and I enjoy the spirit in which I did it. I was a kid who wouldn't take no for an answer and thought I could do my own record.
What's impressed you the most about making this album from 20 years ago, to today? What's caught your eye about, if anything? What stands out more to you possibly on it?
You know what? Probably what stands out more is, there's certainly funny things, as a player, you change over time, not only do you get, better and maybe technically more proficient, but you mature, and there are certain things that I just don't play much of anymore. So there are technically things on the original record that's like, man, how the heck did I do that? Why did I do it? Or, and I'm a different player now. So to me, back then, I'm sure I was just this young gun who just wanted to play as many notes as possible and get them all in there and kind of show off. And now it's, I feel like I don't have to do that anymore. So that's probably the biggest change, or maybe at least what I've noticed, between then and now.
How long did it take to record the album from the first time, if you can recall, possibly, versus today when you re-released this? Well, when you re-recorded, I should say.
Good question. I imagine back then I probably had a much better work ethic, meaning I was just excited to be there doing it. So I'm sure I was probably trying to record stuff every night that I could, without waking up my parents. So chances are I'm sure I probably got a bulk of the work done and recorded probably in a 4 or 5 month period, maybe. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I spent time, writing the material at the time a little bit longer. And now, I tend to get to things when I get to things. So, but obviously there's, life where you've got a job and you're working, or for me, I'm teaching or traveling or something like that. So I think this time I started recording the first track, the first tune in November, maybe October. And so finished all of that up probably into March. So 9 tunes over about 5 months.
Are there any songs off the album that stand out more to you on it after redoing these songs after all these years? I mean, are there any that stand out for you possibly? I mean, I know these are like picking your favorite sports team or collectible or child, but are there any possibly for you?
Yeah, a couple tracks come to mind. One of them is there's a ballad out there called So Close So Far. And at the time when I originally recorded it, the whole album, when I was younger, I was really listening to Joe Satriani. Back when I was 22, my head was, I was really listening to a lot of Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. Steve Vai was probably the impetus for me to go ahead and try to record my own record like he did with his Flexible album. And that's kind of where my playing was at. And so this song, So Close So Far, this ballad, kind of sounds like that. And then when I listened to it, when it came time to re-record it, I thought to myself, man, there's no way I'm going to play like this again. It just doesn't sound cool. It's a little cheesy. It's kind of just 80s guitar. But how do I make this so that it still, shows the melody and, touches people and has a more mature kind of, performance? And it's kind of a joke now to me, but, I tell other guitarists, I go, if you ever wonder, if there's ever a question you're asking, about how you should approach, some guitar music, ask yourself, what would Jeff Beck do? Because everybody loves Jeff Beck, and he's like, the king of just, understated, beautiful melodies, great tone and touch.
Yes, sir.
And so after a few tries of, doing what I do, I'm like, well, this isn't working. What would Jeff Beck do? And of course, Jeff Beck doesn't play with a pick anymore. So I said, man, I wonder if I could do this melody with just my fingers. And of course, it forces you to play slightly different, but really focus on just really your touch, your vibrato, the tone, and the phrasing. And so I think that tune really kind of came out of, nowhere and go, man, that really turned out really well. I was very surprised by, you don't know what you're going to do until you do it. And that one, surprised me with how well it turned out.
We talked about this just a little bit ago, just for a little bit, but how much growth musically have you seen yourself go through from the start up till now of re-releasing this album? Or has it just been more of a personal growth for you for this ride, man?
As a musician who's constantly trying to learn and get better, I mean, if I just compared myself to the way I was back then, well, it's night and day. It's, 100-fold difference in my mind, when it comes to the amount of material I've learned to play, sing, write, the amount of other kinds of music that I pursue, whether it's jazz, classical, country music. It's a huge difference. The neat thing about going back and doing this record is it reminds you how much better you are as a musician. Back then, it probably took me a whole night to get a good take. It took me a lot of tries and a lot of trial and error and some bad takes to, get what I thought was, something that I wanted to listen to. And nowadays, well, it takes me maybe 2 or 3 times and I've got it. Or I can do more of the music in one take than it used to be me piecing together a bunch of good takes. So as a player, the instrument comes easier to me now than it used to. So things are a little bit more efficient. And probably when you hear it, it sounds more natural to listen to and like something that, should have been played and felt right to be played versus sort of working at it all the time.
I know this is a crazy question. I know you've done this for a very long time, but do you still see yourself pushing yourself from track to track and whatever that you're working on into the collaborations? Do you still see yourself pushing yourself to outdo something that you've done before possibly?
I am probably always considering that. Half of me wants to do what is just plain old right for the song and the music. And then the other half of me wants to make it interesting for myself and make it a challenge. And I used to think that challenge used to be just a technical challenge. How can I play something that's really hard that I haven't been able to put under my fingers before? But nowadays it's sometimes that, but it's also sometimes, like my album before was a blues album. It's like, I've never recorded a blues track before. How do I do this, make it sound authentic, yet still interesting and bring something new to the game? So that's its own challenge. So for me, maybe not every track, but with every album, there's going to be moments on there where it was tough to probably pull off, but I come out the other end as a better player, having come up with those parts.
Do you prefer like a style that you like to play? Do you prefer one or the other, or does it even really matter at this point for you?
It doesn't matter. It's all good music, or maybe not. I love the challenge of playing jazz, and it's the simplicity of just plugging in a guitar and no effects, no distortion, and just getting the tone out of that instrument, and the challenge that, that sophisticated kind of chord changes and stuff, come up with. But also, I'm still young at heart, so I like to rock out. It's all, I like to do a whole lot of everything.
You're the author of the book Progressive Guitar Warm-Ups and Exercises, and also a Guitar World Magazine online lesson columnist and education coordinator for Guitar Center lessons.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are wanting tips or want to learn how to play guitar, and trust me, I did, and I got frustrated with it, and I just said, fuck it. What advice would you give them who are serious about this and want to dedicate time to this?
I would say in the beginning especially, you'll want to find a good, experienced teacher. And that teacher should have both sort of an academic background, so they went to music school, they learned, somebody taught them how to play correctly, but they also have real-world experience, meaning that they gig still, they play out, they, jam with other people, and they bring, the world and that experience to it. Now, the reason they should be taking lessons one-on-one with somebody is because, boy, I know YouTube is out there and there's a lot of material, but it'll make your head spin because none of it is done in a step-by-step process showing you, one thing following another that would make some kind of, sense. So in the beginning, you want to know how to hold the guitar correctly. You want to know how to hold the pick correctly. You want to know where to place your fingers and how to hold the neck and all these things. Life a whole lot easier going forward versus kind of picking things here and there and then eventually getting frustrated. Mm-hmm. That being said, later on, yeah, YouTube is a great resource. I go to it all the time. If I'm interested in a specific song or tune or an arrangement that somebody else might be doing, then certainly, yeah, I go check out that sort of stuff. But that's what I recommend at first.
Do you do anything differently during the writing and recording process to maybe help keep your mind fresh and open to, to not let the music get stale, not go down a path that you don't want to go back down to, because I know that happens a lot, but is there anything you do to help keep your mind open and fresh to this?
Fresh for me usually comes in the form of me checking out some other music or revisiting music that I know that I like. So, for instance, in this last record, it would have been silly for me to just go listen to a whole bunch of Joe Satriani and Steve Vai records, even though that's where my mind was at 20 years ago. I wanted to think about what a modern sound would be for that. So I'm checking out, newer records by newer guitarists and things like that. For other albums, if it's a blues record, I'm going to, listen for style cues and production cues from other, blues artists. Sometimes I get inspired just by listening to, a different band or a different record I might have grown up with and go, man, that still sounds good. I wonder what it takes to make something sound like that. And then I might take that in that direction. So, I guess it, puts my mind into the scenario, but I don't think there's anything that really, distracts me. Once I get started, I just kind of keep going.
Adrian, for the fans who have not got to see you live as of yet, what can they get at a show from you when they come to see you live?
Well, they'll get a lot of music. So we just did our CD release party last Wednesday at a club here in Los Angeles called the Baked Potato. And we typically do a couple sets, and it's a couple hours long. So, it's a good variety, though. Some of it will be instrumental. Some of it will be vocals. And, of course, I give everybody in the band a chance to kind of shine, and you got drum solos and bass solos and everything else.
Now, we're living in the digital era of recording albums and plus social media. Do you like this that we're living in right now? I mean, to get music out quicker and plus, to reach out to more fans who maybe not heard of you possibly.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the benefit of it. It's a double-edged sword. These days, anybody has the ability to, record and release a record, but, it's a mighty big pond now. So to be a big fish is harder and harder to do. But, the ability to deliver, an excellent product and get it out there, over the course of mere minutes, if not just a few hours, is fantastic. You and I are talking only because of this. So it works, It's harder and harder to make money selling music by all means. So, but I've always been pretty good at, wearing many different hats in order to, make music, make a living for myself.
What does Adrian Galysh bring to the table for music possibly? Because, I know you've worked with a lot of great musicians, but in your own opinion, for somebody that's looking for a session musician like yourself, what do you bring to the table for
Sure. Well, there's a couple different kind of sessions you might be talking about. One might be for some other person, another artist or another record. And then there's, just literally session recordings, meaning you're recording for a jingle, for a commercial, background music for a television show, or, who knows what it could be. And those are two very different, approaches. The artist is hopefully hiring you because you sound like you, and they want what you bring to the table, style-wise, sound-wise, tone-wise, and playing-wise. So in that regard, they get somebody who, has their own voice as an instrumentalist and, can bring that kind of rock tone and technique, to their tracks. Now, if it's somebody who just needs, guitar for, some sort of television program or something like that, well, then they get somebody who can read music, has the right instruments, the right tone, shows up on time, and doesn't waste their time, that kind of thing. So certainly not everybody can do that. Not everybody shows up. They can put a chart in front of them, read through it, give the person a few different choices and takes and different kind of, performances, and then leave, and, everybody's happy. So
what made you want to become a musician? What was that spark for you that said, yeah, I want to become a guitarist?
This is an easy question, and I get it a lot. When I was about 10 years old, older friend of my older brother's let me listen to Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz record.
Hell yeah. There you go.
And it had Randy Rhoads on it, and I heard tracks like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, and I could not believe what I was hearing. And I never heard guitar played like that. I never heard such extended solos, and the excitement and the intensity of what I was hearing just was pretty exciting for, a 10-year-old to hear. Mm. And I was already listening to some rock, and collecting records, but I never heard anything like that. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if it's that exciting to listen to this guy play guitar, I got to imagine playing guitar itself is pretty darn cool. And I remember begging my parents to let me take guitar lessons for 2 years until I was 12, and they finally gave in. And my parents, being kind of conservative, were like, well, if you're going to take lessons, you're going to take classical guitar lessons. We're getting you a classical guitar, which at the time was fine by me because I knew Randy Rhoads was doing classical guitar.
There you go.
So I was like, yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, started out on it. There you go.
So that was literally the turning point. That was, I can remember it clear as day.
Now, we know Zach was part of Ozzy, and I don't mean this with any disrespect whatsoever. All these guitarists that's been part of Ozzy has been phenomenal. Fucking great guitarists.
Mm-hmm.
$1 million question for you, though, Adrian. Who would you... Jakey Lee or...
Or Zach?
No. Jakey Lee or Randy?
Oh, well, geez. Well, Randy Rhoads. but you know what? Now, if I heard maybe the Jakey Lee records first, that might have changed as well.
Sure.
Those were pretty darn cool, too.
Sure.
I think it was a matter of timing and the unfortunate thing where, Randy tragically died, and so obviously his legend continued to grow. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah.
But there was something that spoke to me as, somebody who, me growing up in a family where there was a lot of classical music and then the classical influence that he had, I was like, man, this is like right up my alley. This combines all my favorite things. The fact that he was a teacher, and of course he came across as this really nice guy and really sweet kid who loved his mom. And I'm like, this is somebody I can finally, model myself after, kind of thing.
Like I said, folks, the ones that are out there listening, I didn't mean that as a disrespectful question. I just mean that, because, a lot of people get angry about that. They're like, oh,
you know what? I know what I prefer. I like them all.
Sure.
And it's I'm not going to say there aren't some bum Ozzy records, but the first 6 were still pretty darn good.
Yeah. I mean, I like Jake's playing, but God, man, I absolutely love Randy's and Zach's. I just don't know what it is. I guess it's just that
Well,
that
the timing was everything, because before Randy and Eddie Van Halen, nobody played like that. And after them, everybody did. So it could have been George Lynch after him. It could have been England. It could have been anybody, but they weren't first.
Is there a show or a moment that stands out to you more than any possibly that you can recall being part of, man? I mean, if you can, possibly.
Wow, there's a bunch. Let me see. I'll tell you guys a pretty cool story. So I grew up listening to Uli John Roth from the Scorpions a lot. And those were some sort of, weird 70s albums version of the Scorpions that, most people wouldn't have heard on the radio. But something about it, I was like, man, this guitar player is awesome. So grew up listening to Uli John Roth. Never had a chance to ever see him because, well, frankly, he never came to the United States for about 19 years. Until about 2004 and 5, he started doing some tours with Michael Schenker. And about a year or two later, I see that he's going to be playing in Los Angeles, and it's called Uli John Roth and Friends. And there's a list of players, all these different guitar players and different singers and musicians that were going to be these special guests. And it was going to take, over the course of 3 nights, he was doing 3 shows with all these different guests. And I'm like, man, I got to see this. This is going to be great. And the more announcements of special guests, the more I'm like, well, crap, I know that guy. Man, I know that guy. I'm going to see if I can play on this show. And this is like around 2006. And so I sent Willie John Roth an email through his website, not thinking I would, one, ever get a response, let alone think that it's him responding to his own emails. Because to me, he was just a guitar god ever since I was like 12 years old. And about 2 days later, I get a response because I sent him, something along the lines of, hey, my name's so-and-so. I'm a guy here in LA doing, work and session stuff and got some albums out. And I saw that you're playing this show. And if you've got room for one more guitarist on stage, man, would I be honored to play. And his response was, hey, I checked out your website and listened to some stuff. You sound great. By all means, it would be great to have you. And I couldn't believe it. Cut to about 6 months later, we're doing the shows, and it's me playing my favorite old Scorpions tunes with Willie John Roth on stage. But not only that, it's like Francis Buchholz, the bassist from the Scorpions, is on bass. The singer is like Jeff Scott Soto from Yngwie Malmsteen's band. There's Warren DeMartini from Rat is like standing next to me playing rhythm guitar next to me.
How cool!
And I just can't believe what I'm, seeing. I'm like, no way would 12-year-old Adrian believe what is happening right now,
Yeah.
And then that turned into playing the same, kind of stuff the next night and the next night, and then the next year and the next year until I ended up touring with him in 2011.
How cool is that, man? That's just like a dream come true.
It is pretty darn
kid.
cool. I mean, it's one of those things you just kind of check off your list of, I can't believe that just happened. And,
For sure. Yeah. We lost an iconic musician 2 weeks ago. Two or 3 weeks ago. Vinnie Paul, drummer of the mighty Pantera, Hell Yeah, Damaged Planet, Rebel Meets Rebel. Do you possibly have any cool stories that you'd like to talk about, Vinnie? Maybe, because everyone I come on here, I ask is just out of the love for Vinnie Paul and what Pantera has brought to the table for music, man.
I don't, only because, man, just different timing and different circles. The closest I've ever come to, meeting him would be at a NAMM show convention in LA, where the cool thing about him was, besides him being who he was, is he would walk the show floor and just stop and shake hands and autograph anything for anybody who ever wanted. And I've been to these shows where literally people walk around with security guards, or they're in a hat and sunglasses trying to avoid being noticed. And this guy was just a regular dude who was just happy to, be around. Yeah. And even since, his brother died, he was nice enough that, people who he's never met before would come up, give him condolences, and he'd be like, man, thanks, I really appreciate it. And, it's just such a tragic thing. I mean, what else do you got to say? I think guys like that don't deserve that.
Exactly. I agree. I met him before at Loud on Life a couple years ago. Very, like you said, man, very down-to-earth guy, very humble, and doesn't meet a stranger. Does not meet a stranger.
Nope.
Are you working on anything new right now, or have, in the works that you could talk about, maybe?
As far as new material, not yet. Literally, the last album just came out 2 weeks ago on right. July 10th. So I've been sort of all in that, obviously talking to you and some other folks, doing a lot of, press work for it. I think what's around the corner is, and I usually do this for a lot of my records, is I'm going to be coming out with a backing track only version of Venusian Sunrise, so that guitarists out there who are, wanting to jam and hone their chops can have some, backing tracks to play to and work with. So that'll probably be coming out in a few months. And I always keep saying this, and I keep putting it on the back burner. I probably have another book in me. So I've got enough material that I've done for Guitar World that I think I can just put together this, new book. So those are probably the two things that I can think immediately that'll be happening soon.
Folks, Venusian Sunrise is out right now. Adrian, how can folks pick this album up, buy some merchandise, stay in touch with you? How can he do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to my website, adriangalysh.com. That's ADRIANGALYSH.com. And from there, they can either go to my merchandise store, or they can just get all this stuff on iTunes or Amazon or all the usual places, Spotify.
Before I let you go, good sir, would you care to do a promo for the show?
No problem. Gotcha. Folks, this is Adrian Galysh, and you're listening to BODS Mayhem Hour. Tune in or just don't tune in at all.
Everybody stick around. We got some great music coming up, and you only hear these interviews right here on BODS Mayhem Hour and BODS Mayhem Radio Network. Thank you so much, Adrian, and the best of luck to you, my friend.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.